Good evening, televiewers. Welcome to this edition of Prime Hour, the first for the week. We this evening are going to be looking at what is making news surrounding the African Cup of Nations that is expected to be hosted in Cameroon next year. Lots and lots of talks and speculations as to whether eventually Cameroon is going to be hosting the African Football Jamboree or not, because there are lots of manipulations and schemings asking for it to be postponed owing to the health situation that not only Africa is faced with, but the war. We're talking about COVID-19. A Nations Cup to hold or not to hold in Africa is going to be the focus for tonight's edition of Prime Hour. With the panelists who are in the studio already, we are in the company of Professor Mark Anthony. He is a Pan-Africanist, a reason why he is here this evening. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Leo, and good evening to my fellow panelists and to you, Africa, watching us at this hour. It is indeed my pleasure to be here today to talk about this pertinent issue, and in fact a disturbing one, because it is unheard of and it is actually embarrassing to get to know that a Nations Cup that Africa and particularly Cameroon has been preparing to host for, I think, over 4 years right now, is being threatened. So we need to get to find out what is wrong and how we can overcome that. And so we'll be discussing that this evening.
Also with us is another Pan-Africanist, Andre Natemi Bako, is in the house with us this evening. We're glad to have you, Andre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Komnyonat, and a special greetings to all Cameroonians who are participating in this program, and greetings to all the panelists who are here tonight. Thank you very much.
With us also is Tamai Jarvis. He is a journalist who works with us here. We're glad to have you, Jarvis. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Yo. Good evening to Gianni Infantino. Good evening to the CAF boss. Of course, good evening to Samuel Tofis. Good evening to the President of the Republic. And a special good evening to the peace-loving people of Way Village.
How are you this evening?
I'm not fine. I'm not fine on two counts. One, on the fact that we let the continent to be tussled by the European, and two, on the count that we seem not to love what we have as a nation. There's a lot of hate out there, especially with regard to AFCON. When I see Cameroonians instead praying and fasting that the AFCON should be postponed, I ask a question, if at all we do know what we really want in a nation. When people politicize sport that is supposed to come like a ice in the ongoing wahala that we've all had in the Boko Haram in the north, of Anglophone crisis, all those, but this is a moment where we think that at least we can pacify ourselves, while hoping that we have we solve our political problem ahead. But you see, people are, going political. So I'm not fine. When I look at what is happening, I'm not fine.
Also in the studio with us is Maître Joseph Tafo. He is a jurist and militant of the Cameroon Renaissance movement. He is on that ticket this evening in the studio with us. Bonsoir et bienvenue.
Bonsoir, M. Léonard. Bonsoir aux co-panélistes. Merci de me convier sur votre plateau. Nous espérons être à la hauteur de ce rendez-vous pour pouvoir mieux édifier les Camerounais sur les différents sujets qui seront soumis à notre intention ce soir.
Okay. We also are going to be having interactions with Wancha Cynthia, who is a sports journalist based in Bomen, the Northwest Regional Capital. I will start with you, Professor Mark Anthony. Should we, at this time, be talking about, even speculating about the possibility for Cameroon and Africa to host this Nations Cup?
It is actually something that is disturbing when we start getting things like that come up. The reason I say that is because we had been preparing for this particular Nations Cup for years. And I am sure that even in the midst of the COVID-19 in 2020 and all that was happening, I'm sure Europeans had their different leagues actually played. And in the midst of so much debt, I think if you can go back, you discover that Great Britain record debt of more than 10 million infected cases and over 100 and something thousand deaths. And so you can imagine, and Cameroon as a nation within this period of time has recorded 110,000 infected cases and just about 1,500 deaths. And so if we are to look at a situation where COVID-19 is supposed to play a major role in actually postponing the Nations Cup, then I would think that there is a kind of game somewhere, because the European leagues were not postponed. They kept on being played. And we are talking of a Nations Cup, not just a league. We are talking of the Nations Cup, the pride of Africa. What makes Africans, even if they have problems, celebrating? And so, Mr. Leo, the question is, should we at this moment be thinking of such? I would say it is a taboo. If Africans can allow themselves to be manipulated in different areas, it should not also be in football. We have been colonized. We have been, in fact, enslaved. And above all, we are being, should I use the word, recolonized in different ways, economically. But when it comes to this idea of football, I don't think Europe has the right to dictate on us how we should play football in Africa. And they should not tell us when it should hold. We don't sit in Africa and do any vote to determine whether the European Champions League should hold, the European Nations Cup should hold, or the European leagues should hold. We don't do that in Africa. So how comes that they think they have the audacity to determine when ours should hold? And it is worsening when you go through the wordings of the president of FIFA, who backed the idea of the postponement of AFCON, using a statement, in fact, favoring whatsoever we call the FIFA Champions League. Yeah, we have a World Cup that's going to take place, which is a club, the Club World Cup, the FIFA Club World Cup, which is supposed to be taking place in Dubai. He is favoring that particular World Cup, Club World Cup, which is supposed to start on the 3rd of February, over the African Nations Cup, which is starting on the 9th of January. That's one day after the finals. Just imagine. So it is aching to see such a thought being expressed by persons whom we think that are supposed to be governing football in the world. It is embarrassing. And I think that it is time for Africans to stand as one and make their voices heard. It is true that some of our African brothers thought it wise to vote against the Nations Cup taking place in Africa, which is a taboo. Africans, if we have to excel, if we have to make a difference, there's just one part, and that is unity. If we cannot stand together and make our voices heard as one person, we will be humiliated everywhere and every time. And that is why, if you look at what is happening right now in the world, you just imagine that we are having a situation of the COVID-19, where this Omicron strand is actually killing and affecting the world. It was discovered in Botswana, if I can give the... Yes, it's Botswana. It's Southern Africa, and that's the way they told you, but it's in Botswana that it was discovered in. And what is worse is that when the scientists discovered it, they tabled it to the World Health Organization. And it was discovered that this thing had been already in Europe and was not discovered. It had been in Europe all this while, and it was not discovered. And when we discovered it here, we informed them. What did they do? They rather impose restriction to the whole of Southern African nations. That to me is a crime. And that is why the president of South Africa stood up and in Senegal last week, 2 weeks, and said this is hypocrisy. If Europe wants to prove their boss nature, it should not be done even when science is at work. When COVID-19 came up and the Africans came up with a cure, they said it was not scientific. Okay, this time science has proven that there is another trend of COVID that is affecting the world. Why not accept it and look for solutions together? Why place a ban on Africans? This is the same thing that has come back. Now they are struggling to postpone the Nations Cup in the name of COVID-19.
Good evening.
That is a crime.
Good evening to you, Tegen Henry Tata, and to you, Fonyo Emmanuel. Grace Abundance, good evening to you, Fondon Richard, always watching the program, and to you, Mark Amos, Andy. Flore Kenya, watching us from Bafoussam. Bonsoir, toi, Flore. Andrew Atemebako, the continent of Africa has been looking forward to celebrating the continent through football. We saw this postponed, and should we still be thinking about a possible postponement? Are there some people that are sincerely not happy to see Africans celebrate?
The issue is not whether there are some people who do not want to see Africa celebrate or Africa emerge. That is the very reason why the UN was set up in 1945, was to make sure that Africa is the way it is if ever they are going to succeed. So Africa being what it is today is not a strange, or it's not a coincidence, or it's not an accident. These things have been carefully planned. And if you look in the democratic arena, things do not happen by accident. Things are happen by people who have carefully calculated and put strategies in place in order to get a return. So to me, I would say that, you see, when you failed in building what I call value and qualities and self-esteem in the lives of your own people or in the life of your own nation, these are the results you get. Because if they are disqualifying Africa at this period on the notion or the pretext of either the COVID or the conflicts in Africa or the one in Cameroon, I think that it is in our part to really realize that the underdevelopment that we have been entertaining in Africa really is playing in our disadvantage, because even the small things that we could have benefited worldwide, which is supposed to come to us, we are also losing them because we have refused to build values in ourselves. Our leaders, how will I put it, they have made us to believe that to be submissive to your nation has become a crime. That is, to be submissive to your own people, it means that leader is a foolish leader. But these are some of the things that at the end of the day, if you, a leader or a head of state or an administration or a government that is unable to meet the demands of its own people and lift up the lives of its own people, these are the same, you reap what you sow. If you can't respect your people, you don't expect others to respect you. And that is why they are not respecting Africa, because they know how disorganized and how disunited the African people are. So what we are finding today is just part of what we have been sowing as a people. We talk all the time about unity, but we forget to understand that our unity must not only come, as a matter of fact, on the 1.3 billion or 1.2 billion Africans which are in Africa. I've given statistics of about 3.5 billion Africans which are out of Africa, and this is where the core of our unity is, and this is where the imperialists long ago knew that if Africa is going to stay divided, the Africans in the diaspora should not have any, should not have any involvement in the affairs of Africa, and the Africans who are at home should not have any link with the Africans in the diaspora. And that's why it has gotten to a point where we cannot even recognize ourselves. We are here struggling on our own, hoping that we are going to change things. We can't change things because any house that is divided against itself cannot stand. The division of ourselves, Africans away from Africans, it will create a whole lot of instability, underdevelopment, bad economy, corruption. There are just so many things. Why? Because it has offered room for other foreigners to impose on Cameroon. As a matter of fact, if Africa is wise, we must learn to live together by living apart. Because we are talking about the African Nations Cup. How does it concern the imperialists? Or how does it concern Europe? Or how does it concern FIFA? We should be able to organize it. It's an African thing. We are talking about African Nations Cup, isn't it? This should be something of the African Union. We should be the one managing it. So if we are still expecting FIFA to tell us on how, whether it will take place in Cameroon or not, how can FIFA interfere in an African Nations Cup? Where is the role of our own organizations of football in Africa? We do have them, but what are they saying? Should they have to get permission from FIFA in order to organize this competition? The answer is no. So that sovereign right is where we do not get, because we have failed to seek solidarity among ourselves. We have failed to seek support from among ourselves, and we have failed to seek capacities and resources which Africans are capable of supplying themselves. We are talking here today, like I gave example, majority of European countries, including America, were all built by Africans. Why is it that our leaders are failing to use the very Africans which are in the diaspora, who build America, who build Europe? Why can they not seek that alliance to build Africa? This is what we are talking about. You talk about, you go to Nigeria, you go to UK, you find over 700 and something thousand medical doctors. Africans have capacity, but all those capacities and resources, human resources, are all being exploited in the West. They are not being used or invested in Africa. Now, if we have to bring back these Africans and build in what I call solidarity, reconciliation, and unity, you will realize that we will not have anything to do with the UN. We will not have anything to do with the AU. We will not have anything to do with the EU. We will be able to be self-reliant, self-sufficient, and be able to manage our own self. But the way Africa it is today, if we are looking at the majority, Mr. Komnionat, 3.5 billion Africans out of Africa, 1.2 billion Africans in Africa, where is it weighing much? We should focus on understanding that the diaspora has fought in history to make sure that Africa was organized. Do you know, Mr. Komnionat, as a matter of fact, we are talking about Africa. Do you know that the Africans that were taken out of Africa were able to own lands abroad? Jamaicans, those are lands that were owned. Haiti, they own those lands. Those lands are not lands like how we are paying colonial tax. They don't pay colonial tax there. So if we do not understand that the Africans who were taken out of Africa that are in the diaspora have what I call this, the capacity, the intelligence, the wisdom, the resources to chase away this imperialism in Africa. If we are only expecting at the level of our leadership, all these democratically elected presidents are all products of the UN. These are not products of the African people.
Good evening, Mr. Liu, and the panelist is Charles, writing from the United Arab Emirates. Good evening to you, Charles. Good evening, Mr. Liu, and the panelists. I'm big God love watching you from Abu Dhabi, still in the United Arab Emirates. Good evening to you. Mr. Liu, people should forget about COVID in this issue. The main problem that Cameroon will not host AFCON is too much insecurities. COVID is just a cover-up since the international community has been silent and don't know how to come in now. Ngala is writing from Bamenda. Yeah, but it is not set that we are not going to host. Certainly Cameroon is going to host, but we are also asking why it is so much talk about it. Good evening to you, Helen Ashu, and to you, Peprish Futurizi, Fidelis Ambeshu, Etoy Collins, and to you, Azik Prince, all watching on Facebook. We also greet all of you that are watching us through our Facebook handle this evening. Jarvis, he talked about the fact, he raised the issue that we are talking about an African Nations Cup, but we are so concerned because persons from beyond Africa are actually wanting to dictate whether this cup should hold or not. How do we understand this?
You know, if you don't define yourself, people define you and define you from the wrong perspective. We as Africans have given the Western nations and organizations the ability to see that without them, we cannot grow our football, we cannot grow our support system. For example, our CAF has been so dependent on FIFA in terms of logistical support, in terms of technical support. But it's not that we cannot do these things, but just because of the mentality that we feel like if these guys are not there, we cannot do it. And that's why we say we did not define ourselves, we allowed them to define us from the wrong perspective. Because if not, how we explain the fact that you have an African Cup of Nations? This is the first time in history that we'll be having 24 teams that will be playing an African Cup of Nations in Cameroon, and of course in Africa as a whole. This is the first time we're having 24 teams. And how on earth do you wait for authorization from the World Football Governing Body, FIFA, to tell you that, hey, you know, it is not safe for you to start or to continue with this competition? Let's get this clear. It is not that Cameroon is not going to host. Cameroon is going to host, but the issue is when and how. And the truth of the matter here is that it is political. Political in which context? Political in the fact that we have people or persons who don't want to see, the nation host this competition, and they don't want that the glory should go to a group of persons. For example, we were all aware when the FECAFOOT elections was going on, and we realized that when the elections were going on, this FIFA and CAF had their own candidates, and they backed their own candidates, whereas the home federation in itself had its own candidate, and we were all told that one candidate was called by FIFA and CAF and he was told to step down, and that this other candidate to move on. And the candidate that was called won the election. And now we are looking at that candidate is seeking forward to organize a successful CAN, to assist the nation to have a successful CAN. And you still see now this same FIFA is saying that, hey, we have to postpone this CAN. It simply tells us that you are not happy with the candidate that was, to me, from my own analysis, you are not happy with the candidate that won the FECAFOOT election, and you want that the candidate should fail from the beginning, such that they should say, hey, we told you guys that this person is not competent, and you see this guy made a promise that he was going to make CAN favorable, but he cannot. So to me, this is just a political stunt against Samuel Eto'o. That's how I see it. The second stunt I see is that these European nations, European organizations, are making us understand that we cannot own ourselves. This is a red line. They have crossed a red line in two contexts. One, COVID-19. You cannot claim that we have COVID-19 in Cameroon, that it's because of COVID-19 and the Omicron variant that was discovered. That's why you think that it should be postponed while major leagues should go on. In 2020, when COVID-19 struck, we were all witnesses how other major competition, including the English Premier League, was suspended. Leagues were suspended. And after a while, this league started picking up steam because of the fact that they said there was vaccine. Vaccine came in, and now we are saying that Omicron virus. Cameroon, as of now, has recorded 1,000 deaths. You go to UK alone, put together, UK has about 10,000 plus deaths. So if you put this statistics together, the death toll, 170,000 rather dead. You put the death toll of those who have died from COVID-19 related issues in UK, and alone is more than Cameroon, Nigeria, Chad, Burkina Faso, Gabon alone. Those who have died of COVID-19 just in UK. Instead, Cameroon government should be worried about CAN and says that, hey, we are worried about COVID-19. But the government is not worried because the government has taken dispensation to ensure that this COVID-19 is contained. That's why the Minister of Health said COVID-19 vaccination centers have been expanded and decentralized effectively in such a way that people can be adequately, taken care of. And also at the airport level, people are being tests is being conducted. I remember when I came back from Kenya, that was in 2021 February. I was tested at the Douala International Airport for free and tested for COVID-19. So measures have been put in place by Cameroon government. So Cameroon government in itself, if we are looking at COVID, should be the person to worry. But they are worrying over us because they feel that COVID-19, to me, is not an issue of COVID-19. Professor Mark raised an important issue. The variant COVID-19 was discovered by African scientists. Yes. Omicron was discovered by African scientists. In the same light, it was existing already in UK, in US. It was existing also in China and South Korea and some other nations. Now, this is the interesting thing, Mr. Leo. When it was discovered, flight restrictions were given to Southern African countries. On the other hand, UK did not restrict flight from US. They did not restrict flight from the other areas, and it was proven by saying that those who had this variant in UK and other Western nations had no link with anyone from the Southern African countries. They had no link at all. Therefore, it means that it's something that has been existing. That's why you see Nigerian Communication Minister Lai Mohammed said this this is a hypocrisy, and said you cannot be punishing Africa for discovering something that you failed to discover. How do you punish Africa for being honest? It means they were dishonest. They knew that Omicron was existing, and just because you cannot tell me that they were unable to discover Omicron variant, or if they're unable, it means that they should allow us to have our can.
They should allow us to fix our issues, identify our problems, and solve them. Good evening to the panel and to the interesting topic I'm watching from the United Kingdom. Okay, George Ekontang, good evening to you. George watching out there from the United Kingdom. This one reads, we should watch what we give our children to play with. Okay, message is gotten. Good evening to all the panelists. You people are doing a wonderful job concerning the topic of discussions. The earlier we Africans stop being manipulated by the Western powers, the better for us. We Cameroonians need our can, and our can we shall host, COVID or no COVID. Philemon, it's writing from Bamenda. Good evening, Mr. Leonard, and to everyone in the studio. I'm Colonel Tanwi watching from Dubai, Marina, United Arab Emirates. Good evening to you. Mr. Leo, this is Elijah Enwako here. The problem in Africa is not the West. The very people that the West uses to pull down Africa is Africans. Imperialists don't usually use guns to subdue us. They use Africans to pull down Africans. Look at those who voted that decision to say Africans should be moved. What we should be discussing is how does the West succeed to use Africans to pull down other Africans, okay? Atamaya Jean-Claude says, good evening, Mr. Leonard and the panelists on board. FIFA has the right to intervene in African football, but the manner in which to do so should be fair. Good evening to you, Jean-Claude. Maître Joseph Tafo, est-ce qu'on peut comprendre ce qui se passe au Cameroun et en Afrique aujourd'hui?
On peut comprendre sur deux plans. Le premier plan, c'est déjà, vous savez que le football est devenu un grand business et il y a le lobbying. Ça, c'est d'abord ça. Et s'agissant du lobbying, il y a les compétitions. Vous savez, en Europe maintenant, c'est les périodes où les compétitions sont très intenses. Il y a d'abord la Champions League, ensuite il y a le positionnement, il y a le championnat où entre janvier et février, les clubs se battent pour maintenir déjà une bonne position dans leur championnat respectif. Ensuite, ils se battent pour se qualifier dans les prochains tours des Champions League. Alors, vous connaissez en même temps l'importance des joueurs africains dans ces différents clubs. Vous comprenez donc que, s'agissant de cette histoire de lobby, si les clubs européens qui ont en leur sein plusieurs joueurs africains acceptent de les faire partir comme ça, il y a cette histoire de Covid-19, c'est vrai, c'est un motif qui tient. Pourquoi? Parce qu'on dit, non seulement on n'est pas très sûr du protocole sanitaire qui est imposé au Cameroun aux joueurs, mais en plus, il y a une période de quarantaine qui est imposée aux joueurs quand ils reviennent de la compétition. Cela signifie qu'un club se retrouve en train de trouver un de ses joueurs indisponibles, non seulement pour la période de la CAN, qui va durer sensiblement 1 mois, mais au retour, il va observer une période de quarantaine, presque 1 ou 2, ça peut arriver à 2 semaines, ça dépend s'il revient avec...
Mais il y a, à cause du Covid qui est ici, on a vu Copa América se jouer, non? Il y avait Covid. Est-ce que ça ne s'est pas passé? Il y a Covid, on a vu les European Cup that took place.
J'en arrive justement. Ça, c'est le deuxième pan de ce qui se passe maintenant avec la FIFA et les clubs européens. Donc, la première chose, c'est déjà de décourager les propres joueurs africains de pouvoir prendre la disposition, le chemin de l'Afrique. En même temps, ils donnent l'impression qu'ils ne nous font pas confiance par rapport à nos différents protocoles sanitaires. C'est-à-dire que ce soit les vaccins, que ce soit les traitements qu'on a fichés. Mais ils oublient qu'il y a plus de morts chez eux que chez nous. Ça, c'est le paradoxe qui est là-dedans. Il y a plus de morts en Europe que chez nous, contrairement à ce que l'Organisation mondiale de la santé avait déclaré quand cette pandémie a commencé, parce qu'ils nous avaient donné des statistiques selon lesquelles il y aura toute une hécatombe, des hécatombes en Afrique. Aujourd'hui, on est en train de voir...
that was not given by the World Health Organization, it was given by a lady.
Voilà.
Yeah.
Oui, donc ça c'est ce qu'ils ont dit. Bon, en même temps, vous comprenez que, étant une affaire de lobby, ils ne veulent pas perdre leur position, non seulement dans leur championnat, mais en même temps en Champions League. Il y a un deuxième point qui est celui de la qualité même de nos dirigeants, de nos autorités. Parce que si... Il y a un proverbe dans mon patois qui dit « c'est la patate qui avait accepté de se faire manger cru ». Le macabo qui est grade là, on ne peut pas manger ça cru. Ça, c'est une évidence. Donc, ça veut dire que quoi? Quand les dirigeants se laissent manipuler, quand les dirigeants se laissent imposer un diktat, voilà ce qui arrive. Vous ne pouvez pas imaginer l'Union européenne, je veux dire l'UEFA, se faire imposer un emploi de temps ou alors accepter le chantage de la FIFA par rapport à une compétition, lors d'une compétition. Ce n'est pas possible. Pourquoi? Parce que les dirigeants de l'UEFA ont de l'autorité. Ils s'imposent. Et en même temps, il faut leur demander de respecter la loi. Parce que quand ils parlent de nos joueurs qui viendront, qu'ils risqueraient ne pas libérer nos joueurs, ils font comme si c'était une faveur en libérant les joueurs pour venir jouer en Afrique. Pourtant, c'est les lois de la FIFA. C'est la même chose qu'on voit à l'Africa Foot depuis 2013. Parce que la FIFA fait ce qu'elle veut à l'Africa Foot. Ils mettent des dirigeants qui ne marchent pas, ils ne respectent pas les lois, comme par exemple ce qui a abouti récemment à l'élection de Samuel Eto'o et qui risquerait d'être attaqué. Parce que c'est la même chose que les gens font depuis 2013. On nomme les gens, on fait des fausses élections, on attaque. Quand ça arrive devant le TAS démontre que les lois de la FIFA même n'ont pas été respectées. Donc envoyer les joueurs africains jouer en Afrique, ce n'est pas une faveur. C'est ce que les textes de la FIFA disent. Mais ils nous donnent l'impression que c'est une faveur. Pourquoi? Oui, malheureusement. Ils nous donnent l'impression que c'est une faveur. Pourquoi? Parce que nos propres dirigeants n'arrivent pas à frapper du poing sur la table pour dire « it's enough ». Laissez-nous orienter nos compétitions et respectez-nous au même titre qu'on vous respecte. C'est pas normal qu'on se laisse manipuler, de cette façon-là. Donc voilà là où il y a ces jeux de lobby. Et la plupart de ces dirigeants qui se laissent manipuler, c'est parce que, vous savez, le football aujourd'hui génère beaucoup d'argent. Ils n'y vont pas, ces dirigeants n'y vont pas dans les têtes, je veux dire en tête de nos différentes fédérations parce qu'ils aiment leur football. Non, c'est pour se faire de l'argent. Okay. Et comme ils se font de l'argent, il faut absolument qu'ils acceptent d'être les valets de la FIFA pour se maintenir à leurs différents postes. C'est ce qui est malheureux.
Okay, Wancha Cynthia, who is in Bamenda, she's going to be coming in to tell us what she thinks about the fact that we should be speculating about the possibility for Cameroon to host this Nations Cup that we have been talking about for some time now. She is a sports reporter working in Bamenda Northwest Regional Capital, also the team press officer for Young Sports, Young Sports Academy. Wancha Cynthia.
Hi there, Leonard. Thanks for having me onto this edition of the program. And I'm very excited that we're talking about sports. We're talking about the African Nations Cup that has got the attention of the world and especially the attention of Africa. And just to go straight to respond to your questions, of course, any country that's it's programmed to host a competition of this nature shouldn't be speculating about hosting of the AFCON in January at this time. But of course, you and I know that Cameroon, of course, it's Cameroon. You've been seeing pictures flying all over social media that the Olympic Stadium is not yet ready to host the African and Nations Cup and all of that. Well, I'm currently in Bamenda, and I really can attest to that, Bird. If going by reports, going by reports, we've been told that Cameroon is very, very ready to host the host the African Nations Cup. But we are just so far away from talking about how prepared the country is, and discussions now center around the Nations Cup, or rather the FIFA, and of course European football associations asking for the competition to be postponed as a result of the COVID-19, especially this fourth wave, Omicron. And of course, this is the motive that has been placed behind these maneuvers for this tournament to be shifted. But if you are curious, as I am, you'll be asking, if we go by statistics from the from CDC, that's the Center for Disease Control, you realize that cumulatively, if you put together the total number of COVID-19 cases, COVID-19 related deaths from African countries, and you compare to one European country, you see that Africa still hasn't beaten the record of positive COVID-19 cases in most of this country. I spent my whole weekend. I watched a good number of La Liga matches. I watched a good number of those games, about close to 5-6 of them on Saturday, Sunday. And all of the stadiums or the stadiums were full to capacity. They were fully occupied by supporters of those football teams. And so if we have these competitions ongoing in Europe, why then are they getting so particular about the African Nations Cup? And then in addition to that, I don't know, or I can't tell if the COVID-19 cases that we have had in most of these countries, if they came from the African players who are plying their trade abroad. And I really just don't get where this worry could be coming from. Maybe a call would rather have been placed for more measures to be put in place to ensure that they are able to cut the spread, or to ensure that anybody who is having access to a field or to a stadium should have been vaccinated. People should be able to show their vaccination cards or show proof of the fact that they've received the vaccine or something. I mean, these are just my random thoughts, or these are definitely just my crazy thoughts. And I feel that it's self-centeredness, asking for the African Nations Cup to be shifted or to be postponed. It's definitely self-centeredness. But as you and I speak, and if you've been following up curiously, you definitely know that we are still awaiting the outcome of the meeting. CAF's president, Dr. Motsepe, made it into Cameroon today. They've been having series of meetings, meeting top sport officials in the country and different officials. So we still await the outcome. So far we can tell, we can't see, but all I know within me is that we are hosting the African Nations Cup come January 9, 2020.
Thank you, Wancha Cynthia, filing in there from Bamenda, Northwest Regional Capital. Just to remind us that she is a sports reporter working in the city of Bamenda and team press officer for Young Sports Academy. This one says, good evening. Hi, Mr. Liu and crew. I wish to say that the Western countries have chose to manipulate us as we want because we are so stupid. If CAN will be postponed because of COVID-19, why can other major competitions ongoing be left untouched? E.g., English Premier League is ongoing and we can all see the sporting grounds all flooded with supporters, and we even doubt if the preventive measures are being implemented. Africans need to stand up. If not, we will be witnessing recolonization. Akumbu watching from Kribi in Kribi, Cameroon. Good evening to you all. Dubai is hosting the world's largest event, Expo 2020, with millions of people. They will not talk about it, but our African Cup of Nations want to be stopped. It's a shame to us Africans to allow that then dictate to us what do all the time. Pilo is watching us from Kumba. Good evening, Mr. Kum. To me, this is high time Africa stand up and defend themselves. These European countries should take everything we have. They are there playing their own games, and there is no COVID there. Anyaka is writing from Yaoundé. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Africans were supposed to be the ones to be afraid here, not the Europeans, based on the COVID issue. We were supposed to be the ones to be afraid of the dangers these players may bring from a heavily infected Europe, not Europe being afraid of their players coming to a less infected Africa, Mr. Liu. Such acts are the reason why we say COVID is real, but not as dangerous as it is being propagated. How can less infected Africa be more dangerous, heavily infected England and English league going on? And huge crowd. Tiku Felix is writing from Boya. Put your house in order and stop blaming the white man for all happenings to the continent. These various white people gave Cameroon to help fight COVID, but what did your government do? They stole the money. What hospital do you have in Cameroon when you are having their medical treatment in Europe? I understand your point, but we look at our house and put it in order, okay? George is writing from the United Kingdom. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Samuel watching from Canada. Please, the doubt surrounding the hosting of AFCON has nothing to do with Samuel Eto'o. This is due to the increased incidence and prevalence of Omicron variant worldwide and security concerns in Cameroon. Now, yes, we are talking about, so if many had voted in favor for a postponement of AFCON, we are saying that if yesterday happened in Doha, we should have just been crying over spilled milk. Should African issues, because we're talking about AFCON, there was a vote at Doha. In Asia.
You see, Mr. Liu, I still get embarrassed. Let me use it. Because I'm trying to reconcile this situation. We are allowing affairs that are supposed to be done in Africa by Africans to be determined by people from another continent. Do Asians come and play football in Cameroon? No. Do Europeans come for Nations Cup in Africa? No. So, it is shocking how we are even talking about this thing. We are not supposed to be discussing this topic. It boils down to the fact that we have weak leaders who run the affairs of our nation. Because it is time every African leader rose up and hit their hand on the table saying this time we will not accept this rubbish. In fact, we are talking about a Nations Cup, which, in fact, the world knew that will be taking place in January. FIFA itself that we are talking about knows it very well. We have our players and nationals who have gone out to Europe to play. It is a job they are doing there. And the rules of that particular job permit them to come back to their country to defend the colors of their nation, wheresoever. Then, the European Club Association gets up and says, since they are about to go for the FIFA Club World Cup, if they allow their players to go to Africa to play for the Nations Cup, it will affect their teams. How does that concern African nations? They are working their money. They are out for their money. They are not working for Africa. And so those players, by virtue of the rules laid down in the FIFA, should I say legal guide, these players have the right to come back to Africa. They have the right to go back to their various teams or nations to defend the colors. And so, I don't think we should be discussing this issue because it does not hold water. It cannot be something we should spend our entire time discussing on. That only goes to tell us how Africa in front of the world is despised. Africans and Africa seems to be nothing before the world. Europeans, we just mentioned something here which I will still repeat. If you go look at statistics from the World Health Organization, it will make you understand that the entire Europe is highly affected when it comes to COVID-19.
Yeah, but my question, I want us to stay with what happened in Doha. We have seen how concerned FIFA has been with respect to the holding of the AFCON in Africa.
Yes.
There was Copa America. Did we see the same trend? And what recently took place in Europe that saw Italy crown European champions? Did we see this trend?
It never happened. It never happened. It never happened. You see, the reason why I kept pointing all those things, because if you look at it, Infantino has in mind the FIFA club, FIFA World Cup that's going to be taking place in AUE as a target. He prefers that particular tournament
runs on
well, yes, rather than support the African tournament, which is something that a jamboree that makes Africans, in fact, the biggest in Africa, should hold. So it is terrible.
The question,
so Mr. Leo,
yeah.
It has never happened that even FIFA should stop any nation from running, in fact, the continent from running their affairs when it comes to football. And so I don't think it should happen now in Africa. And so it has never happened, and it should not happen. And Africans should not permit it to happen.
Okay, good evening, sir. Yaoundé should stop the war, okay? The international community is strongly behind the potential postponement. Nelson is writing from Boya. Okay, to me, Africa Cup of Nations should be stopped and Cameroon even sent out of the other major world organization. This is a country where human rights and human lives mean nothing to those in power. Yeah, we've seen other nations host, even in wars now. We saw what happened in Angola, yes. Where the Togolese team was attacked. Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I think our country needs deliverance. Eric is writing from Yaoundé. This one says, if there is no coronavirus in fighting useless wars in Cameroon, the government keep deploying soldiers to sleep under horrible conditions and places, and they don't care about COVID-19, but stop important events because of COVID. Why won't the international community remind them about COVID when it comes to Nations Cup? And Ted Kelly is writing from Bomenda. Ndang Derek Kibai writing from Bomaka says FIFA should not be punishing Africans. I pray that Africans stand like one man and think to run their own affairs. Great, my brother, and the whole My Media Prime. Thank you very much. Good evening to you. Good evening, Mr. Leo. The role of football should not be undermined by FIFA in Cameroon. We need peace and unity in Cameroon, whom witnessed the positive role of football organized by Mayor Digambong, okay, by whom Ivor Smith is writing from whom. Good evening to you, Ivor. Good evening, Mr. Leo. We should forget about FIFA of Cameroon not hosting the Nations Cup. I just heard from One TV, not the president of CAF, declaring that Cameroon will host the Nations Cup, that he is bringing his family on the 7th of January 2022 in Cameroon to watch the Nations Cup. Felix Mpang is writing from Yaoundé. Okay, I have that information too. Good evening to you all. The topic of the day is wonderful. COVID is used to deceive Africans. Africans should get up. Eric Noble Epie watching from Douala. Good evening, Mr. Leo. The issue here is African leaders keep using Corona to beg money from Europe, saying that Corona is killing millions of people in Africa. So tell us how they won't insist Corona still lives in Africa. Vesangni Eric writing from Yaoundé. Now, we are talking about the fact that this is a very big competition for Africans. But I've also read some messages where some people say, Europeans see this as a very small competition, even described by a club manager as a small tournament. How do we reconcile this, Andre?
Mr. Kum Leonard, you see, we can talk about the marginalization of Africa and the crisis in Africa and the African Nations Cup that is being threatened to hold or not to hold in Africa, probably due to so many issues that we can cite and maybe some that we may not be able to cite. You see, but at the end of the day, we may want to maybe blame our leaders for not being very strong in taking strong decisions to defend their own interest in Africa. But at the end of the day, we do not have anything. We seem to be depending on them for everything, and that is the major challenge. When they are the ones to call the shots, when they are the ones to set in the rules and regulation, right up to how you elect your own president in your own country. And I keep saying, if you allow others to appoint presidents for you and you expect such presidents to make your life better, that's another definition of a fool. Because if you as Africans or as Cameroonians are unable to set their own systems on how to produce their own leaders that will reflect the demands of their own society, it means that you are just, at the end of the day, the problem is not the leaders, the problem is the people. Because the people have refused to assume their responsibility, assume their position, and assume assume a position of accountability and responsibility. If you allow, like I keep saying, Mr. Kum Leonard, we will talk here all day. We will blame one another, blame leaders, blame the West and all of this, but it still comes back to say that if you look at the percentage of those that we are blaming as leaders, they fall within 3.3% of the entire population of Africa. So are you now telling us that over 97% of African population have no sense of responsibility of coming together and changing structures and building systems that can reflect their own values and their own identity? That is where the challenge is. We all depend. When the UN says is democracy, democracy is more damaging in Africa than COVID. Africa has 5,000 medical plans which are discovered in Africa alone, which means that we are capable of handling any kind of variant that will come out even in the next 2,100. Africa is capable of handling. But democracy is far damaging and destructive in Africa than COVID.
More than COVID.
Because we can handle COVID. We don't have a challenge here with COVID. We have researchers, we have people who have come out with cure for COVID, which we know. So we do not have that challenge with COVID. So COVID should not be a pretext for any African leader to allow foreign decision to be applied in Africa. These things are very important for us to consider. We should judge these things very wisely. So to me, I think that we have failed as a people and as a nation collectively on how we as a people can come together on the basis of our common problem, because our problems are common. Whether you are in Nigeria, you are in South Africa, you are in Mozambique, you are in Ethiopia, you are in Cameroon. You can use the case of Ethiopia and analyze what is happening in Cameroon. It is all the same. One of the I think somebody made a comment there who is in UK and said we should stop blaming the white man. No. At one point, some people may think that it is true. Let me tell you something. I keep saying that if people will say we should not blame the West for the condition of Africa today, I will agree with them if the West was not in Africa. It's in UK. Why UK is in Cameroon? UK is in Africa. It's in Europe. The entire EU is sitting on AU.
Yes.
Russians are in Africa. Americans are in Africa. It's like you are visiting a man who is at your own home. So you cannot keep it's like in those days we used to have people who are possessed with demonic spirits. They killed them in order to send away those spirits, but they come to realize that the spirit leaves one body and enters another body. So there was now a new spiritual understanding that came that you can cast out those demons and the person can come back to his senses. That is the situation we are facing in Africa. The presence of the multinationals in Africa is what is causing this, what I call structural adjustment policies. Their hands are tied. Why? If, for example, a country like Cameroon is owing, let's say, 100 billion, and you are unable to pay, and they tell you that this is what you want us to do, what do you expect the head of state to do? He's forced to abide by what they are telling him because he has submitted himself through debts and loans. Is it not the same thing we saw here with this breach here in Douala? 120 billion went to France. France gave it to China for 80 billion. And then China now gave it to Cameroonian to something lesser than 80 billion. This is what we are talking about. When, pardon? That is what I'm trying to say, that these are structures which were set in place by default in the beginning to indebt Africa. Because if you want to control somebody, you need to put the person at the condition in which you leave the person with no choice. And that is where we are. So it is us. That is why I keep saying that change in Africa will never come from the level of this leadership. It will only come from the masses. We saw in Mali what is difficult for Africans to rally, like how the Malians rally and brought out an administration which has destroyed that country for 25 years under a democratic system. We don't need, I keep repeating, this democratically elected president. They are doing us no good in Africa because these are rules and regulations set by the UN on how we should go indirectly to go and appoint leaders. We don't want this kind of system. We want to be able to see leaders that will grow them up like seeds from the ground. We can water them. They are submissive. They are obedient. We can do checks and balance, but not those that come from the sky like goats and spirits. We are unable to control them. But rather, it is the West that seeks to control them. And their decision which they try to take is always at the detriment of the African people. We need to take a different route here. That is the way I look at it.
That's the way you look at it. Okay. Good evening to you, Hedwig Mbong, who is watching us from Bonaberi here in Cameroon's economic capital. Alongside Mama, extend my greetings to her also. We are going to be taking a short break to come back and continue with our topic for tonight.
Want to be the king of the festive season? With Orange, you can. Win 500 smart TVs at #111*1# or via my Orange app.
Orange.
Be the king of the festive season with Orange. Dial #111*1# or go to my Orange app and stand a chance of winning 500 smart TVs, 15 brand new cars, and 5,000 francs every 5 minutes.
Orange.
There's nothing more magical than spending good times with the family during the holidays. So, join Canal Plus and let's spend the holidays together. To welcome you, the decoder is 5,000 francs and installation offered with many channels.
Ça sera la musique ou rien.
C'est tout.
What to love?
Nous avons un duel Afrique de l'Ouest, Afrique centrale.
Dance and ignite your evenings. Share strong moments full of twists and turns.
C'est grandiose!
And even make the younger ones dream.
Passage en vitesse, Mac Noël!
Tout est prêt pour qu'on profite de
I see you watching my stories. I see you getting my lifestyle. I see you watching my movements. This bad bitch bad every day. I know they look at your face. Bad man bad every day. Get on your knees and pray. Do you regain your faith?
Kumba City Council presents We Came, You Saw, Together We Conquered, and You Asked for More. Kosi, TZ Panchak, Big G Baba, Fish, Kamini, Spacko, Renew, Mike Monster, CY International, Vivid, Bless B, King Kum, plus your superstars based in K-Town. Music by DJ Bizu and Jerry J. DJ. Animated by Molango Zani and General Talks. City of Kumba Invasion. The Comeback Concert on the 29th of December 2021 at the amusement park, 4 p.m. Pass 1,000 regular, 2,000 VIP, 5,000 premium. Be ready for the Comeback Concert. An end is here with excitement. Powered by the Kumba City Mayor, Greg Mewado.
Welcome back. You're watching Prime on My Media Prime. We are going to be continuing. I'll start with you, Tamai Jarvis. When we see European clubs actually, though they say they may not want to release players to come to Africa, indirectly telling us that they can determine whether the African Nation Club actually plays or not. Is this not also a wake-up call for Africans themselves to invest heavily in African football?
Yeah, it's a wake-up call because if you see from time past, we've so much pay much attention to European clubs than our home-based club, and also sponsorship and partnership level. I believe that's why that was one of the reasons why you see Samuel Eto'o's push forward his candidacy for Fecafoot, such that they can be that home-based power to get sponsored, to get the local leagues in a position that it ought to be. For example, if you look at Egypt, the local football level in Egypt is a bit higher and more professional and more mediatized as compared to that in Cameroon. And if you see Al Ali and all the other leagues, is different from what we have in our own local level. At one point in time, we saw Cameroon players signed in Egyptian leagues and also in other leagues across Africa as compared to our own. The only issue that we have, especially is Cameroon, where most of these companies don't seem to put more energy and more resources in our local league. And because of this, it has created an effect whereby players who are supposed to show their talent in Africa are off bracing up to go to Europe to showcase their talent. And we have brain drain. In terms of brain drain, it's not only at the level of offices, but also at the level of the sporting field.
Talent drain.
Yes, so we have talent drain. A lot of talent drain, because if you see European clubs can stand and boost and hit their chest and tell us that we will not release players, and we are singing and saying, please release our players, there is a problem. The problem, therefore, is because we have not valorized what we have. We have not paid attention to Kumbu strikers. We have not paid attention to Bambutus Bunda. We have not paid attention to Manka Sport Academy that is already creeping and crawling and dead. We have not paid attention to Unisport Bafang. We have not paid attention to Cotton Sport of Garua. A lot of teams, we have not paid attention to all of these teams, and this has a direct effect as to what the Europeans see us. Mr. Leo, remember from the beginning of this program, I said, if you don't define yourself, somebody else will define you from a wrong perspective, and that is how they are defining us. That's how they will even go to the extent to call the African Cup of Nations a small competition, because they feel, because we have not made them to see the booster. How many European players have signed in Africa as compared to the level which African players have signed in Europeans? That's how the way the barometer. So that's how the way the barometer. It's not like there's no money. We have a lot of resources in Africa, but our businessmen in Africa choose or decide to go and buy clubs in Europe. We had one point in time they wanted to buy Arsenal FC. We had one point in time they are investing in other clubs in Europe. The reason is simply because, again, on this aspect, I'll tie with Atem, that our African president, we need enlightened, benevolent despots. People who look at African development not just from a political perspective, but from all the facets like sport, culture, tourism, and all the rest. Because if we have leaders that invest in sports, if we had a football governing body or football association that involve in sport and tell companies that you have the corporate social responsibility to invest in sport, you have that corporate social responsibility to put this certain amount in Fecafoot so that we can host tournament, I think we'll go far. If you look at our local leagues, name me 10 players in our local leagues that we know who are making wave across the globe. But if you go to the street in Douala, ask a small boy of about 15 years to name you 10 players in Europe, they will give you 20, not only 10. But if you come to and ask that, name me 10 players in Cameroon, 10, in fact, let me not go to 10, 5 or 3 or 2 players in our local leagues, they will not tell you, but they will give you all the names of the first starting 11 of Arsenal, Manchester City, Barcelona, and the rest, even the jerseys that we buy. If you go to the market, you rarely see a jersey for Young Sport Academy, Kumbu Strikers, Unisport Bafang, Bamutus Munda. You rarely see these jerseys. It tells this picture, and it tells the Western man to tell you that, hey, these guys, forget about it, we can decide on them. It is now time. This is a wake-up call that we should go back to our drawing board. That's why I am happy that Samuel Eto'o was voted. If you look at the wave that went on when Eto'o was voted for CAF president, there's numerous calls, that the numerous congratulations that came from our top African players. And this is a wake-up call for Eto'o to see that he has a great role to play. And it's just sad that Drogba did not win in Cote d'Ivoire, because it would have been a tough alliance. That you have Eto'o, you have Drogba, and these people can create a wave in Africa and bring back the value.
That, El Hadj Diouf is also
vying in Senegal.
He says he wants to, and that Adebayo is also thinking about. Yeah.
Yes, these are moments where if these players can come together. I remember Paul Pogba made a statement sometime that it's time for players in Europe to go back in their respective countries that they have their roots there and develop their football and abandon Europe because of the poor treatment that they are being given to them. Now, again, in this AFCON, you see players that clubs are telling us that they will not give us our players. They should keep our players. We have other players that will bring in this competition. If we go around Cameroon, all the local leagues, we can have 10, we can have starting 11 that can defend the African Cup of Nations, that can win all this trophy. The same thing with all the other countries. There's this coach, I don't know if it's in Nigeria or Ghana, that said, any player that don't want to come should just forget about the national team. Morocco. That any player that don't want to come should just forget about the national team. We have a player, Toko Ekambi said there is no coach that will stop him from coming to play in the motherland. These are the kind of players that we need to tell the European nations that, hey, look up. Now, in response, we need our home government to support these players, because this decision will have an economic impact or an economic effect on them. If a player decides to violate the law of the club, it means that player risks having the contract terminated. And what in return do we give to these players? What in return do we assure them that, okay, even if at this level? So to me, we need to go back to the drawing board. The political arm needs to go back to the drawing board. FECAFOOT go back to the drawing board and re-galvanize forces. It is time for African Union to say enough is enough.
Okay. Daisy writing from Kumba says, good evening, Mr. Liu, and to all the panelists. It's an interesting topic with wonderful cream of panelists. I don't see Cameroon as apt to host AFCON. Yaoundé has always been manipulative. How safe is Boya and Limbe to host some matches? Good evening to you, Daisy. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Nice program and wonderful panelists. It will be very sad to hear that the African Nations Cup is not taking place in January as scheduled. Let Africans sit and make their own decisions and forget about foreign nations. Africans are resistant to COVID-19 more than them. Sumbele Kelvin is writing from Kongsamba. Good evening to you. Kelvin, au vu de ce qui se passe, est-ce que vous êtes confortable avec les réactions qui viennent des autres pays africains? Est-ce qu'ils ont agi assez pour je ne sais pas, aussi faire peur à tous ceux qui s'agitent à l'Occident?
Ils n'ont jamais agi comme il faut. Ils ne se sont jamais comportés comme des dirigeants responsables. La preuve, c'est que on reçoit aujourd'hui le président de la CAF, et Samuel Eto'o, qui était en réunion à Doha.
Oui, ils sont revenus ensemble.
Ça, c'est une réunion qui concerne l'Afrique, mais ça va siéger en Asie. Vous avez déjà vu une réunion qui concerne l'Union européenne ou bien l'UEFA qu'on a siégé en Afrique? Donc vous voyez qu'ils se font manipuler. Pour qu'on arrive à une indépendance de manière à ne plus se faire manipuler, il faut que nos dirigeants déjà aient la capacité de frapper du poing sur la table pour dire ça suffit. On ne veut plus se faire manipuler, on ne veut plus entendre qu'on nous parle n'importe comment. S'il y a des textes, je voudrais rappeler que la CAF, la Confédération africaine de football, est l'association la plus puissante parmi les 5 qui forment la FIFA. Cela signifie que si au sein de la FIFA, les responsables, les représentants de la CAF prennent une décision et s'y accrochent, ça va marcher comme il faut. Mais ils ne le font pas parce qu'ils sont manipulés, ils se laissent manipuler. Il est hors de question. Moi, en réalité, je n'ai pas trop de problème avec FIFA ou tous ces dirigeants européens qui nous trimballent n'importe comment. Non, je n'ai pas véritablement de problème. Mon véritable problème, ce sont nos dirigeants qui se laissent manipuler. Et tant qu'on ne va pas comprendre que nous, on peut avoir un pouvoir suprême, que nous sommes supérieurs. Il y a le collègue tout à l'heure qui a dit il faut qu'on organise notre part de championnat en Afrique de manière à faire un championnat professionnel en Afrique comme ça se passe en Europe. On peut bien, on a toutes les ressources. Il faut savoir que c'est l'Afrique qui nourrit l'Europe avec toutes les ressources, que ce soit minière, que ce soit sous-sol ou bien n'importe quoi. Mais ils prennent chez nous pour aller... quand ça arrive là-bas, ils nous donnent quelques prix. Le jour où les dirigeants africains vont comprendre qu'ils ont le pouvoir, le jour où ils vont comprendre qu'on a assez de richesses, que c'est nous qui nourrissons le monde, on ne va plus se faire manipuler de cette façon. Regardez comment on est en train de courtiser les gens de la FIFA pour qu'ils nous laissent jouer une Coupe d'Afrique des Nations. Mais là, on dirait que la CAF est devenue une sous-tutelle, c'est-à-dire que l'épouse de la FIFA, c'est quand même ridicule. Pourtant, ils sont aussi puissants. C'est-à-dire qu'ils forment un groupe aussi puissant au sein de la FIFA où ils peuvent décider de ce qu'il en sera demain. Mais malheureusement, ce n'est pas le cas. Ils s'accrochent et j'ai dit tout à l'heure dans ma précédente déclaration qu'ils se laissent manipuler. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il faut rester au pouvoir, c'est-à-dire qu'il faut maintenir leur poste. Ils savent que c'est des postes juteux, ça donne beaucoup d'argent. Or, en critiquant, ils n'auront plus la possibilité de... On ne va plus le faire, on ne va plus les élire. On a plein d'exemples. Il y a Kalusha Bouala, le président l'ancien président de la Confédération, de la Fédération zambienne de football. Il a subi cette foudre-là. Or, il n'y a personne autour de lui pour le protéger. Souvenez-vous qu'on va beaucoup le regretter quand Issa Hayatou, l'ancien président de la Confédération africaine de football, était encore au pouvoir en fonction. Vous imaginez la CAF en train de manipuler les pays africains comme ça? C'était pas pensable. On ne pouvait pas l'imaginer avec un dirigeant comme Issa Hayatou à la Confédération africaine de football. Aujourd'hui, on se fait piétiner, on se fait manipuler. Récemment, encore avant les élections de la FECAFOOT, on nous a fait savoir qu'il y a eu une réunion organisée à Kinshasa, où il était question d'interférer, c'est-à-dire de convaincre Samuel Eto'o pour qu'il ne soit pas, qu'il retire sa candidature au poste à la présidence de la FECAFOOT. Pourquoi? Ils ne veulent pas Eto'o là-bas. Pourquoi? Parce qu'ils savent que Eto'o, on ne peut pas le manipuler n'importe comment. Ils n'ont pas besoin de dirigeants comme ça. Et nos propres dirigeants politiques font tout pour qu'on reste dans cette, je veux dire, qu'on reste enfermé, c'est-à-dire qu'on reste dans cet esclavage-là. C'est une nouvelle forme d'esclavage, c'est une nouvelle forme de néocolonialisme et ça prospère parce que nous, on se laisse faire, on donne la possibilité. Vraiment, il faudrait que, au moins à partir de ces péripéties, au moins à partir de ce que nous sommes en train de vivre, mais ça c'est une humiliation de trop que nous sommes en train de subir. Au moins à partir de cet exemple, il faudrait que nos dirigeants prennent leurs responsabilités, se disent que non, mais quand même, c'en est trop.
Ok, merci beaucoup, Maître Joseph Tafo. Special greetings, good evening to you, Mami Isabella Tso, who should also be watching us from Bonaberi in Douala here, Cameroon's economic capital. We are once again going to be moving over to Bomenda to take a listen to Wancha Cynthia, sports reporter and team press officer for Young Sports Academy, react to a question I'm asking as to who is going to be the biggest losers or winners should there be any postponement of the AFCON.
Of course, there are lots of people who have invested, individuals, the country, There are lots of people who have gotten into loans to see how they can invest and make some money from a competition like this, which will have tourists, which will have a good number of persons coming into Cameroon, in and out. So these are people who stand to lose. These are people who stand to lose the most. Even the country stands to lose. The country definitely stands to lose too. Imagine the money that has been injected into preparations, hotels, hospitals, roads that have been rehabilitated and constructed, and all of that. I equally know that a postponement like this would definitely come with some compensation. But then, how many of these individuals who have personally invested are going to be compensated? Talking about whoever it's going to gain, definitely the gain it's going to be for whoever it's asking for the competition. Asking for the competition to be postponed. Whatever they stand to gain, I'm still to understand what it is. But I'm more worried about our brothers and our sisters, or our parents who have engaged, taken loans, who have invested, knowing that they can make some extra cash during this competition. And again, the resources from the country that have been diverted into preparing for the African Nations Cup. So if they're asking for a postponement, it's going to coincide with other competitions that are ongoing. These are definitely the people who I'm just so worried about them, who stand to lose most. Cameroon, it's definitely going to be the biggest loser. No matter what money is given to us as compensation, it can never really make up for what has been invested or what has been put in place to prepare for the hosting of the African Nations Cup. And if you want me to talk about what must be done by Africans to maintain the hosting in January and in Cameroon, I think that Africa and Cameroon must stand their ground. They must stamp their feet on the ground. We must see CAF back Cameroon up. We must see CAF back the African continent up by stamping their feet on the ground and saying that Cameroon, it's going to host this competition come January, and Africa is ready to participate in this African Nations Cup. I think they just have to be determined. They just have to put plead their case and insist and tell FIFA that this is where they stand. They can even threaten to withdraw. I mean, it could be the last. It could definitely be the last option. But I honestly feel that if Cameroon or Africa allows this competition to be postponed, then it's a slap on the face of the African continent, and it's a slap on the face of Cameroon. And I'll quickly just talk about my expectations. Is that I expect Cameroon to host the Nations Cup come January 9th, 2022. I equally expect that as the cup gets to Cameroon, it's going to remain here. So I'm looking forward to what the coach Antonio Conceição it's putting together as a team. I'm looking at how I'm expecting that this team that it's going to put together by the coach, it's definitely going to defend the colors of this country and bring us some glory days. Some of us were not yet born when Cameroon hosted the last Nations Cup sometime 1972. So it's going to definitely be very, very exciting. My expectations are definitely just high to see how what obtains, and to see the excitement, to see whatever comes with any country hosting a Nations Cup of this tournament.
Wancha Cynthia, the team press officer for Young Sports Academy. Commander Beast, we are very, very impressed and happy that you took part in today's edition of the program. She started raising possible ways for this nightmare not to see the day of light in Cameroon and Africa. Are you also surprised that by now nobody is already telling FIFA that should this thing not hold, this is what we intend to do?
It is surprising, Mr. Liu, and that is the reason why I started by saying earlier that we have a problem, and that problem first is also the leadership, which is weak. Because we actually lack individuals who have that capacity to say, let this not be heard again. everybody is quiet. I mean, everybody is quiet. And might be leaders of other African nations are quiet because it is happening in Cameroon, not knowing that if it happens in Cameroon today, it will happen like that in another African nation. So it is very, very important that all sport lovers in Africa rise up and tell FIFA and tell the European Club Association to stop their manipulation. It is very, very aching when you hear a club leader in Europe mentioning that the Nations Cup in Africa is a small tournament.
Yeah, and there was no official response to that outing.
No official response. Nobody said anything.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to start asking the question: what are Africans thinking about Africa? Do we really love this continent? Are we sure that as individuals we have any idea on how to promote this continent ahead? You see, in everything, Mr. Liu, it is in everything. We earlier spoke here and we mentioned the issues that are various problems that are happening in Africa, and we discovered that when it is happening, might be in Ethiopia, the other leaders stay quiet. When it's happening in Cameroon, they stay quiet. When it's happening over there, every other person stays quiet and watches. And we are hearing by the international community. You hear Europeans who speak, you hear the Americans who speak. That is how Africa is losing. Because if we are unable to handle the affairs of our own house, who do we expect to handle it for us? And that is why they believe that they have the upper hand, because they seem to be handling everything for us. So I think that it is time African leaders rose, and not only African leaders, lovers of this continent, whether you are whether you are a kid or whosoever you are, I think it is time for every one of us, our voice to be heard. Whether it's on social media, let our voices be heard. Whether it's on main TV like this one, let your voice be heard. And so we should not stay quiet. We shouldn't sit behind, because there is no greater player when it comes to the destiny or future of a people. Every individual is a player. Every one of us is a player in making sure that our continent becomes respected. We can't allow the West to keep on determining for us how our nation, our continent is supposed to look like. We are discussing something here. We are having Nations Cup in Africa. Voting was taking place in Doha. How in the East, Middle East, how can that be? So you get to realize that most of us, we are saying nothing in the midst of all this. So I think, and I will still repeat it, let our leaders not only speak, let every African rise up and speak. We must make sure that any intruder, whosoever they are, should know that Africa belongs to Africans. And we determine how things are run in Africa. It is true that we have allowed the West to feel like they are the ones that are helping us. No. Let me remind those of you watching me here right now. Don't forget, Europe was built by Africans. Don't forget. Europe is still being built by Africans. Don't forget. The European economy is totally sustained by wealth that is leaving Africa. So it is in no way that you should think that they are building Africa. Anything they give us is supposed, in fact, by right, we are supposed to collect whatever belongs to us from them. They were supposed to have paid us for the slavery. They took our brothers to Europe and enslaved. They were supposed to have paid Africa for that. They came here, claimed that they were colonizing us to civilize us, and rather destroyed our civilization. They were supposed to pay us for that. And worst of it, till now, they are using their puppets in our African nations to loot out our resources, and we claim that they are building Africa. They are not. They are the worst thing that ever happened to Africa, and I think that Africans should get wise, and we all should make our voices heard and let the Europeans and the Westerners know that Africa is Africa.
Okay.
It's for Africans.
Good evening, Mr. Liu. I love your outfit tonight. Hope you will send one to me in Chang as well. Ready for the show indeed. Derek Walla is writing from Chang. Good evening to you, Derek. Yes, I hope I can send you one. Yes. Greetings to all. How can you be calling during this? Greetings to all the panelists. Latest information from BBC says the CAF president says the competition will go ahead as planned.
Yes.
Fombi Michael Vigan writing from Bomemba. Yes, those are the good. Eli, can you get through to Padia Sanga? We should be on standby. See if you can get him. Once he's connected, let me know so that he can participate in the program. Just struggle to get to Padia Sanga. You should have his address. Edwin Atemibako, we are talking about other media organs are already announcing that the CAF president has confirmed that eventually Cameroon is going to host. But did we need to fight all this while to put pressure, to put resistance before this is done? How do we ensure that this does not happen for other nations who may be given opportunity to host such tournaments in Africa?
You see, Mr. Liu, that is why I have been trying to say that Africa is at war. And until we understand that we are at war, we will not be able to assume our own responsibility and our own position. In every war, there are two things that happen. Either you kill or you are killed. So there are no spectators, there are no commentators, or there are no civilians in a war. They are all soldiers. That's why you realize that Abiy Ahmed went to the battlefront and called all Ethiopians to rally themselves for battle, both home and abroad. And they did. And that has given him some extra power to fight against the propaganda built by the Western media. This is what we are talking about, and that's the same thing Prof is talking. We need, as a people, at my age, Mr. Kumulida, should I not be running Africa? At my age, Mr. Liu, should I not be in a position of decision making? This is what we should be talking about. If we allow and keep complaining that we've already understood what is happening in Africa, and if we do not apply the solutions, like I keep saying, that once a solution is found to a problem, failure to apply that solution is worse than the problem. And this is what we need to do at this point. Coming together. We are talking of players that are probably will be sanctioned if they come to play to Africa. Is that not our human resources? Like I keep saying that they had an objective over Africa to exploit 85% both natural and human resources. That's why we have all capacities out of Africa. Africa is underdeveloped, but you go to the Western world, we find all capacities there. It is the African player that is giving the flair in those European teams. It is the African players, but we do not have those players here. Name any field of profession, you find them in the West, doing extremely well in the West, and the West is maximizing their resources and their capacities and their talents and giftings. But those things don't come back to Africa. And that's why they can call the shots, because they are the one paying them. Because we have built Africa in such a way that it has created a vacuum of poverty, which causes Africans to what I call voluntary slavery, where they go back to the West to help them continue to build on what they have stolen from Africa. This is what we talk about voluntary slavery. Why must we live here and go there? Why must we have all those capacities there? Why is it that all those best players that we are expecting to come and play in these African nations must come from Europe? If they came from Africa, why must they leave Africa and then travel there and then come back to you? Is that no risk in traveling? We should already have them here. So what we are saying here, Mr. Kum Leonard, is that we have to understand that we need, as a people and in this generation, that if the imperialists will survive with this leadership in Africa today, they will not survive our own generation. We should build very stiff resistance, because now we master them very well. As a matter of fact, we understand that Cameroon, Africa is being controlled by systems, structures which are older than even presidents and heads of states in Africa. We are talking of the structure since 1945. which does not have any DNA or any affiliation or had any representative at that level when the United Nations was formed. That is why we are not giving veto power at the level of the UN National Security Council, which we do not need. Okay. We do not need it. We do not need it because if we come together, we have our sovereignty. What we are seeking for, we are not looking for veto power. We are looking for sovereignty, Mr. Kumluna. And this takes us unity. You and I and the diaspora, we need to unite. We need to reconcile. I gave very practical example. Look at Ethiopia. Look at Northwest and Southwest. It has persisted for 5 years. Why? Diaspora is behind. Why can we not understand a small roadmap? We need to forget about these leaders that are being created with rules and regulation by the UN, and we build our own system. Okay. Are we not also leaders?
Good evening, Mr. Liu and panel. Thank you for your passion. Prof. Mark Anthony, get behind our project. This is why we are fighting. Julius Chofo is writing from the UK. I don't know what project you want, Prof, to join. Mr. Kum, we don't need to beg for CAN to be hosted in Cameroon. It is our overdue right to host this tournament. The West has no right dictating on us. Paddy Brown, the best teller in Bamenda City. Good evening to you, Paddy Brown. The whites are hypocrites. They claim to be fighting against racism in Europe before every football match, especially in England, but at the same time being racist. Why preach what you can't practice? This is just a sign of racism towards Africa. The South American Cup was played. Euro was played. Their leagues are currently playing. So why only AFCON to be postponed? And refusing players from coming to play for their countries. Let them take the lead to stop this racism. It's a big shame. Jack is writing from Bamenda. Good evening to you, Jack. Greetings to all the panelists. Okay. Good evening to you too. Good evening, Mr. Liu and the panel. Claims writing from Boya. The situation can be explained like this. If you are a family head and your wife or wives and children are always crying and causing distress in the whole neighborhood, be sure that even if the people can't intervene, one day they will tell you that they can't visit you because your dog barks too much, even if you don't have a dog. Okay? This one says... Dr. Bakil, thanks for making my points. For Africa is the richest continent in the world. Our leadership are mortgaging their nations, but are the citizens doing? How many professors do we have in Cameroon who see black and conveniently call it white? Who sponsors CAF AU? He who pays the bills determines the choice. Okay? Making my point, for me, our leadership are mortgaging their nations, but what are the citizens doing? Okay, good evening to you two, who is writing from out of the country there. Hello, Mr. Liu. This is another gift by God to the regime in Yaoundé to build a sacred union with all Cameroonians to fight the imperialists. While uniting all the population behind the government, we can talk together and maybe solve the issues we have all over the place. Max Beguins writing from Beguini, writing from Dusseldorf in Germany. Good evening, Mr. Liu and panelists. Thanks for this interesting debate topic. The Europeans are not interested to release our professional players, and they are now using COVID-19 to manipulate Africa. This is a good lesson to our Africans. We should take this as a bitter lesson done, writing them. Good evening. Kindly send me the prime number. Thanks, Kelly Valentine. That is the prime number you just wrote to now, Kelly Valentine. Good evening to you in the studio. Since African leaders want the Europeans to keep wiping their buttocks all the time, why won't the same European dictate to them? Small Anglophone problem you failed to solve for 5 years ongoing now. Small unemployment you can't tackle for 60 years and plus. Why won't they dictate to you? Christian is writing from Amanda. Stop calling, please. Greetings, please, dear brothers abroad. Some of us have invested for AFCON, so please stop being selfish. All you see in Cameroon is evil. No matter how long you live in the UK, you remain a black, please. Florent is writing from Yaoundé. Good evening. Today's topic is interesting and heartbreaking on the to be hosted AFCON by Cameroon. Let us be careful on what the sports body FIFA will do to cancel this competition. Not too long from now, we might soon be facing a situation where, by permission, we'll sought to eat gari and okra soup. Okwakoko and palm nut soup. Total nonsense indeed. A Koka Ngomba, writing from great support. It's not going to be counselor, I'm sure. Greetings, Mr. Leo. COVID-19 should not be what the Western world should use to stop AFCON games in Cameroon. World dirty politics in Africa and Cameroon is what the world is afraid of and will be exposed if care is taken. Ojong Michael, writing from Cyprus. Good evening to you, Ojong Michael. Now, what should we do not to fall into the same situation in the future?
The first thing is we must keep aside hate when national interest is at stake. We must keep aside our personal grievances and individual grievances and unite when it comes to national interest. And the second thing is we must valorize what we have. And the fact that we have not valorized what we have as far as sport is concerned is a major issue why we see the Europeans define us from the wrong perspective. Because if we valorize it, when I talk about valorization, I talk about putting more importance to it and investing into it and ensuring that players can be boast of having their take home can actually take them home. Because if you look at what we have in our individual local levels, even you come to the level of the first division teams, the take home package for the players cannot take them home. And sometimes if you have your sister dating a football player in Cameroon, you are tempted to tell her that you don't want to see that relationship again, because at the end of the day, you don't see the financial or the economic gain that benefit the couple. And so it is quite important for us to valorize it and pump in more money such that the league can move on. And the third aspect, why I think and how I think, is that our leaders, our sport leaders in Africa should be what we want them to be. They should put the continent first and not their pocket first. Because if you look at what Issa Hayatou did when he was still at the level of the CAF, he was firm and resilient, and sometimes there are decisions that were not taken by CAF because he was there. He stood for the interests of African football, and I'm surprised to see that this president is not seeing what Issa Hayatou used to do and also what Ahmad used to do. If you see, one of the punishment that was given to Joseph Seif Blatter was because he brought the World Cup to South Africa in 2010. Joseph Seif Blatter, there was a coup d'etat after the first World Cup came in 2010, where Joseph Seif Blatter complained and said he had a lot of challenges. They wanted that World Cup should not come to South Africa, to Africa as a whole. And that was why the levy corruption against him after the World Cup, they said there was bribing left, right, center. At the end of the day, till now, nothing has been proven that Seif Blatter did what he did, and because he wanted to improve African football. And this attack started from 2010, and we are witnessing it until date. We keep seeing it and going and going. So our African leaders, football leaders, to be more precise, need to stand and hit their legs on the ground and say enough is enough. Let us start valorizing. I hear our Barrister talked about the fact that we don't pay our players because we don't have money. We do have money, Barrister. If a minister can embezzle 56 billion, 70 billion, this billion, and if COVID fund can disappear, and if bags of rice that were brought in for COVID can disappear without accountability, we do have money in Cameroon that we can pay players, that we can boost the football sector. Heavy companies, this is what happened. There's what we call corporate social responsibility. And for a company or big companies to come into play, they must do what we call corporate social responsibility, multinational company. And this corporate social responsibility, the government can carve in policies and say, hey, at least 10% of some of your taxes goes to the football sector, and when it goes to the football sector or to the sporting sector, to be more precise, then from the sporting sector now is being rationalized that athletic take this, wrestling take this, because we have a similar challenge in all other disciplines, sport disciplines. It's not just in football. We are hearing football because Cameroon too much like football. What of Olympics, the Athletics Federation? What of the Cycling Federation? They are suffering. But when you look at other nations, other competition, other nations, they are not suffering because of the fact that we have not covered policy. There's money in this country, and I believe that we can, for sure, as a people, come together and say, hey, what do we need to do? Remember, if sports succeed, Mr. Kum, all other sectors will succeed, because sport gives in heavy money. Look at the amount we spend for jerseys, to buy jerseys. And this amount of money can go a long way. So to me, I've given you what I think we can go above this, because how is it that they will go to Doha What do you even make them to come to the level of voting? If inside Hayatou don't even vote.
Okay. Salut à vous, je me nomme Dieudonné Rahim, liste depuis le camp Sonel au Yomabang. Et vraiment, j'apprécie ce que vous faites ainsi que votre rigueur. Bref, en parlant de la CAN qui est à venir, le constat est que nous vivons un racisme catégorisé parce qu'il est impossible de nous dire que la Coupe d'Europe des Nations se sont passées dans de bonnes conditions et aucun club n'a empêché ses joueurs. Mais pourquoi alors de la CAN des complications de nulle part s'instaurent? Nos dirigeants ne parviennent pas tout d'abord à être précises et s'opposer, vu que d'abord qu'entre nous, les ententes ne collent pas. Vraiment, parmi eux, d'autres ont voté pour le renvoi, mais la majorité sont pour le maintien. Oui, ça serait maintenu. Qu'est-ce qu'il faut pour qu'on ne revive pas ceci, non seulement au Cameroun, mais dans d'autres pays africains?
Il n'y a pas de potion magique. Nous, on se plaint de nos dirigeants. Il faut, voyez-vous, la classe dirigeante en Afrique aujourd'hui, pas seulement au Cameroun, est corrompue, est kleptocrate, ainsi de suite. Donc, la seule solution qu'il faut, c'est de mettre les gens qu'il faut à la place qu'il faut. Et ce n'est possible qu'à travers une prise de conscience des peuples africains pour pouvoir se dire que se lever comme un seul homme dans chaque pays respectif et se dire nous avons besoin des gouvernants démocratiquement élus de manière à ne plus accepter se faire manipuler. Il y a l'histoire de Laurent Gbagbo, par exemple, que tout le monde connaît. Il a perdu, il est allé en à la Cour pénale internationale. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il a voulu imposer une certaine indépendance en Côte d'Ivoire. Vous savez ce que ça lui a coûté. Donc, si on avait en Afrique comme ça 10, 15, 20 leaders, dirigeants qui étaient intransigeants, je ne pense pas qu'on se ferait manipuler autant par des organisations internationales à l'instar de la FIFA ou bien l'Union européenne ou alors l'ONU, ainsi de suite, ainsi de suite. Donc vous voyez, c'est ça le véritable problème. Il faut que les peuples africains prennent leur destin en main, se décident à mettre les dirigeants qu'il faut. Et nous savons tous que nos dirigeants utilisent le football pour endormir davantage la population. Au Cameroun, par exemple, tout le monde sait que depuis des années, on a toujours dit, on prend l'exemple sur les lions indomptables, ainsi de suite, ainsi de suite. Pendant ce temps, on ne voit pas autant de victoires que les lions indomptables nous ont amenés. On ne voit pas à quoi ça a servi. C'est maintenant là qu'on nous parle de la construction des stades, alors que depuis, il y a 5 étoiles sur votre maillot jaune, oui, sur votre maillot là. Ça veut dire que c'est autant de trophées que nous avons remportés sur le plan international. Mais qu'est-ce que ça nous a produit? Pourquoi? Parce que ces dirigeants ne sont pas là pour nous. Ils ne sont pas là pour ceux qui font le football. Ils sont là pour se faire de l'argent. On a besoin des dirigeants demain qui viennent pour le football, c'est-à-dire des technocrates, et puis qui ont une conscience élevée de l'Afrique, qui ont une conscience supérieure de leur propre personne, ils ne se disent pas que je viens là pour résoudre mes problèmes alimentaires ou alors mes problèmes vestimentaires. C'est ça qui est embêtant. Donc nous voulons vraiment des personnes qui vont prendre à bras le corps la conscience africaine et se dire nous avons assez souffert et il nous faut gérer pour le compte de la population qui nous a placés là. C'est d'ailleurs, je ne veux pas faire ça, c'est d'ailleurs l'esprit que nous avons au sein du MRC, c'est-à-dire que faire de manière à ce que cette population soit indépendante, soit autonome et que ceux qui sont nos dirigeants, qu'ils dirigent vraiment la population au lieu de rester là parce qu'ils vont résoudre leurs problèmes personnels. De cette façon-là, on ne se verra plus manipulé par toutes ces organisations-là.
Good evening, Mr. Kum. 20 days to the start of AFCON and we are still getting threats from FIFA and European clubs. Why has this not been happening in previous editions? Is there a particular issue these people have with Cameroon? After the 2019 edition cancelled due to incompletion of some stadia, now we have world-class stadiums and Cameroon has come a long way with this preparation. I am happy the CAF president emphatically declared Cameroon ready to host the AFCON come January 9. We should forget what the Western world is saying and prove to them that Cameroon can do it without them. I like the declaration also made by one of our indomitable lion that no coach can stop him from playing the AFCON. Julius is writing from Yaoundé. Okay, Julius is talking about Carl Joko Ekambi. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Why can Cameroonians like this not join? Okay. Good evening, Mr. Liu and the team. Okay. Africans are seeing. My own point is that we should love our own. This Nation Cup is one of the only legacies our youths have in our continent, because even the way African nations are treated at the World Cup is very poor. Let love lead. Agendia Sylvester is writing from Yaoundé. Good evening to you, Agendia. Greetings to everyone in the studio. Mario Balotelli, an Italian professional footballer, has been crying like a baby about the deplorable state of football in Africa. This is a wake-up call for lovers of soccer and Africa, footballers to team up and build stadiums in the continent, then organize leagues and play real African football that will be envied by the Western world due the level of racism in European football games. Africa really needs to unite in all dimensions. Tabot. Mark Cavelli writing from Yaoundé. Good evening to you. Big studio. This Archer, when Africans will understand that there are each other's keeper then. Okay. Not too clear. Good evening, Leo. Your program is educative. We have group or leaders in Cameroon who are champion in organizing protest march. I wish to propose that such protest demonstrations should be organized without permission. Bashi Daniel writing from Binka, Donga Mantung Division. Okay. If FIFA is coming in now to postpone the CAN in Cameroon with whatsoever reason, it's a mess. Where have they been to advise the government to stop the war or wait till COVID-19 is finished? Kelly Valentine is writing from Marwa. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, Mr. Liu. All I have to say is that when the Western world makes a decision, it is generally accepted, imposed. We need to make our own decisions and stand by it. Bototo Oloto writing from Edeya. Good evening, Mr. Liu, and to all the panelists. I'm happy for such educative topic. We Africans, especially the youth, have been preaching about Africa to stand up as one, but the question now is, should we keep talking, or what is the way forward, and how will it work when all our leaders believe Africa can only survive by borrowing money from the Western Union and nations? Dabosi Garlov writing from Bamenda. What's the way forward?
Mr. Leo, it is very
CAF
clear.
CAF president has said Cameroon is going to host. He just said it today.
Yes.
Yep.
Oui, mais on se rappelle encore, permettez, hein, on se rappelle qu'en 2018, sensiblement à la même période, il était venu faire le même cirque et nous rassurer que la Coupe devrait avoir lieu. On connaît la suite.
What I want to say is, it is clear that the main problem we have is that of disunity. We are not united. So I think first, for this not to repeat itself in the future, Africans need to stand up as one. We should unite ourselves. Secondly, they keep saying that our tournament is a small tournament. We need to make it big, because I think the reason why they say small is based on the financial aspect. So it is time we also build professional football in Africa where our players do not go out of Africa, like what is happening in Egypt. Egyptian players most at times remain in Egypt to play professional football. The same in a country like Algeria and Tunisia. And I think if we do that in the whole of Africa, where we pay our players well, we professionalize the football, we will not have a lot of young men and women with great talents running to Europe. Rather, Europe will become interested in what we are doing. And if they are to come and get a player from Africa, we will have to make it very, very difficult and expensive. So we should valorize what we have. We should give it the value that it deserves for the world to respect it. If not, we will be disrespected at every moment. So I've spoken of, we need to unite, stand together. We need to valorize what we have. Then we need to be able to not just create a professional football, but we have to make it competitive to a state where we will have people leaving Europe to come and get and also they are living here in Africa. That will transform the issue. We are the richest continent on earth. That is not something we are asking. Africa is the richest continent on earth. It is true with the poorest people, but we can change that tide. And it has a lot to do with the kind of leadership we are supposed to institute. And that is why I would end up by saying that we also need to establish a system that will be fitting to the African people and African continent. A system that takes into consideration what we are made of and what we have buried in our soils. It should consider every aspect of Africans. And we should also give room to our diaspora. And when I talk of diaspora, I'm not talking of those who just left Africa and went to Europe to go and maybe look for fend for themselves. No, I'm talking of we should bring in the Bahamas. All those who are found in the Jamaicas, they are Africans. Those in Haiti, they are Africans. We need to work with them in order to build the kind of black continent or black wall, which is not racism in any way, but we must strengthen ourselves because we are being despised all over the world. And this racism that we are seeing, that is exercised at its height, should stop. And we are the ones to stop it. We can't allow it to continue. What we are seeing right now is racism at its height. Where they tell us that there is no racism in football, but they come behind and tell us Africans should not organize their own league because it is a poor league. It's terrible.
Andrew Natemebako, what should be the way forward? Carve out a policy across the board for some quotas to inject money to African football?
Mr. Leo, let me answer that by giving some few examples. Mm-hmm. You see, when Liberia was heavily indebted in 1920 to 1923, it was at which time Marcus Garvey was leading the movement of Africans to return back to create a state in Liberia for all the slaves that were taken out to come back and settle in Africa. What Marcus Garvey did, knowing the setup of how Africa has been split and broken into 54 pieces, which simply means that the poverty in Africa is the inability for the member state to seek support from one another. That is the only poverty crisis we are having today in Africa. What he did is that he rallied the diaspora and raised $1.2 million in paying the debt at which time Liberia was owing to foreign communities. What am I simply trying to say? They realized that the movement of Marcus Garvey was going to give the Africans self-sufficiency and self-reliance, where they did not need to depend on Paris Club, World Bank, IMF. Why were all those structures created on the behalf of Africa? Was to indebt Africa. And why is it that the African member states are unable to collaborate among themselves? We saw it because each of them are indebted to the IMF, the World Bank, Paris Club, and other foreign banks. Let me put it that way. So the Africa, it is that body, Mr. Kumniona, where it is broken down, where a part of that body cannot function as a sovereign state. To find an African head of state who is running a nation in the absence of the diaspora and the unification of all the other member states is another form of witchcraft. In other words, you are trying to occupy or possess your father's property in the absence of other children. This is the way we see Africa today. So what this country has, this other country does not have. And what this other country has, this other country does not have. So in other words, if they are going to emerge, they will need to come together because it is a body. These are not individuals. It's a body, complete human being, they break into pieces. We call it Mother Africa. It's a woman, they have broken her into pieces. A hand has become now a head. A leg has become now a head. That's why Africa today is like a monster. All kinds of civil conflicts, all kinds of weapons are in Africa today because why? They are trying to run Africa individually like private owned state companies on the behalf of those that have broken Africa down. And that is why we are saying that if we are going to move further, Mr. Kumnyona, Africans in the diaspora of 3.5 billion Africa, even if they donate $1, how much are we talking about?
Okay.
We can clear our debts if we unite. We can free ourselves away from the bondage of the IMF and the World Bank and Paris Club if we come together and seek solidarity among ourselves.
Okay, we have all it takes. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I am enjoying your program. What we need is peace. Cornelius Finu, writing from Messager, that's Doga Mantoun Division. Good evening. What is the bickering about COVID vaccination for CAN 2022? Why are the European leagues still going on if COVID is a threat to players? There is something not being said. A Kolesi Habanga Michael, writing in Ngamoki Ngolo. I don't know where that is. Yes. This is a punish to Cameroon leaders since they used our money to construct Olembe Field and denied to discuss Anglophone problems. Okay. Innocent Fukem is writing from Limbe. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Is Dennis in Yaoundé? We must work for ourselves. If our presidents look into this, then we shall come to make it for our nation. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Liu and the distinguished panelists. African countries as a whole, they are not united. That is why the whites will keep on using us as slaves. And for us to stand, we have to be united. Barrister Lovett, writing from Yaoundé. Good evening. Tengung Pekins from Boya. It's because we are not united in Africa. It's our right to host a Nations Cup. Let our African leaders sit up and take what belongs to us. Okay? Everybody's talking about unity. Good evening, Mr. Liu and the panelists. La Liga, UEFA, etc. are found in the Western world. The FIFA president has not made any statement to stop any of the tournaments as a result of COVID-19. Why AFCON? The agenda is of reducing the African population to 3 billion has failed. Let them produce another COVID-19 20. Okay, Mr. Liu, even if it is postponed, the loss would not be anywhere half the amount that has been wasted in war. Let's suspend and solve the problem. Come to Bamenda and ask the last time someone wore that your kind of t-shirt. War is bad. Roderick should be writing from Bamenda. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I'm Alex from Douala. What I can say is that the Europeans are marginalizing us Africans. Okay, I'll end with you, Maître Tafo. On va célébrer. Qu'est-ce qu'il faut de plus maintenant?
On va attendre.
Vous avez encore peur qu'il n'y ait pas le remake de ce qui s'est passé
2019. Je ne pense pas vraiment. Bon, okay. On a l'espoir que jusqu'à la dernière minute, nos dirigeants, au moins ceux qui sont responsables de cette Coupe d'Afrique des Nations, vont comprendre ce sursaut d'orgueil qui est camerounais et puis qu'on n'a plus besoin d'un autre scénario honteux pour le peuple camerounais. C'est vrai que on ne va pas juger de l'importance de cette CAN-là maintenant, du moment où le peuple camerounais souffre avec l'inflation, avec les guerres par-ci, par-là, mais du moment où c'est déjà là, vraiment, il faut qu'on fasse tout. On nous l'a déjà attribué, on a déjà dépensé assez de milliards pour ça. Mais du moment où c'est déjà là, il faut qu'on fasse tout pour l'organiser. Personnellement, j'ai pas trop d'inquiétude. Je pense que...
ça va aller?
Oui, en tout état de cause, la CAN va se jouer au Cameroun.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Leo. Why is CAF disturbing Cameroon? Harrison is writing from Pinja. Good evening, Mr. Leo. Writing you from Bamenda. I'm not seeing Cameroon to host the AFCON because of the current crisis. Okay. Yes, Cameroon is definitely going to be hosting. Mr. Leo, good evening to you and everyone in the studio. The Europeans and Americans should stop deceiving us. The United Arab Emirates Nations Cup took place in Qatar. No one talked of COVID. When it comes to Africa Nations Cup, they are shouting at the top of their voice. For the first time, the president of CAF impressed me by saying no to their nonsense. Star Bertrand writing from Boya. Africans are first all a problem to themselves. Why did CAF president carry his executive committee meeting to Qatar instead of Africa? Nwati Isaac writing from Boya. Good evening to you all in the studio. The war should be stopped so that people will not have fear in their mind. Mustafa Patrick writing from Boya. Okay, this one says the whites are hypocrites. They claim to be fighting against racism in Europe before every football match. Okay, I'm sure I got that already. Let the Europeans not interfere with the affairs in Africa. They both have two separate football federations. From Chris Ryan, we want to thank you all for coming. Andrew Nateme Bako, it was a pleasure having you, as well as to you, Prof. Mark Anthony. Thank you for coming. And to you, Tamai, it was a pleasure having you this evening. And also to you, Maître Joseph Tafu. And we also are very grateful to you, Wancha Cynthia, who came in from Bamenda, Northwest Regional Capital, in the course of the program. We want to thank you all also who took time off to watch this edition of the program. Thank you to the production team. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.